Good, docile crowd. Much different than Monday's audience. I'm not sure how many of you were here on Monday at the VPAC, but if you don't know anything about what's going on here today, this is Big Politics, so welcome. This is a three-part series that focuses on national, state, and local issues. And on Monday night, if you guys weren't there, we had a congressional debate between Democratic Congressman Howard Berman, Brad Sherman, and Republican challengers Mark Reed and Susan Shelley. We had KFI host and CSUN alum Bill Handel as our moderator, in addition to a student and faculty moderator. But as many of you may have known, Big Politics has been quite political on our campus. Among just our campus community, the CSUN Greens have expressed some various viewpoints, as well as the political science department not being too fond of the series itself for the Green candidate not necessarily being included. So with just campus politics, the event has been, I guess, a little bit slimmer than we expected. But thank you for coming. And we have a bunch of wonderful guests tonight. And I want to actually tell you, we went into the hospitality room and we told them there aren't as many people as we expected. And each and every one of them said, well, essentially something where I thought, the hell, let's just do it. So I'd really like you guys to give all our participants and everyone a big round of applause just for staying and attending tonight. And just also as a quick heads up, within about a week and a half, Tuesday, May 15th, in this same room, our series will conclude. It will be the local edition where there will be a one-on-one conversation with Councilwoman and LA mayoral candidate Jan Perry. Special guests include Eric Garcetti, who is a LA City Councilman, as well as Dr. Chip Delane. He is the president of the LA Trade Tech College. Sorry about that. But without further ado, let's get started with tonight. If we could bring up our moderator panel. John Biltz, Anthony Bennett, and Millie Altamirano. I'll give them all a quick introduction. John Biltz, he's a poli-sci major, and he is also the current Associated Students Attorney General. Millie Altamirano, she's a marketing major, management minor. She's a member of the American Marketing Association and United We Serve, and she's also an Associated Student Senator-elect for the College of Business and Economics. And then we have Mr. Anthony Bennett. He's a sociology major, the treasurer for Tau Kappa Epsilon, and he's a member of the Associated Students Productions and involved with the new student orientation. So if we could go give them a little bit of a round of applause. If we could bring up our first participant, she is the Associated Students of Cal State Northridge Student Body President, Ms. Amanda Flavin. She's a business law major with an economics minor, and she is currently attending an internship in Washington, D.C. next semester as part of the Panetta Institute. Then we could bring up one of our participants, Mr. Cody King. This is almost kind of like a catwalk. It wasn't supposed to work out that way, but I guess it is. Mr. Cody King is the chair-elect of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. They are the largest business advocacy group in the San Fernando Valley. Mr. King is also the Senior Vice President and General Manager of the NWW Group's Los Angeles office. They are one of the 5 largest PR firms worldwide. Next up, I guess in this typical catwalk fashion, we have Mr. Eric Anders. Now you'll have to forgive Mr. Eric Anders. He didn't go to CSUN, he went to our neighbor UCLA, but we're going to give him credit and welcome him here very nicely anyways. Everyone give it up for our Bruin. He got his Master's in Business at UCLA. He's also the founder and owner of the Wood Ranch restaurant chain. If you guys have not eaten there, you are really missing out. No, I was not paid to say that. That is just from my personal feelings. But the Wood Ranch restaurant chain, in 2006, it grossed over $50 million in revenue, and they have expanded to currently over 15 locations. So, congratulations, actually. Must be nice. And let's see. Our next up, Mr. Kevin De Leon, he is a state senator for the California State Senate. Can you give him a round of applause? Mr. De Leon is a member of the State Allocation Board. He is also a senior associate for the National Education Association in Washington, D.C. And actually, Senator De Leon, his office called very last minute yesterday. He had a previous engagement and it was canceled. He didn't have to call us. We already figured he was out. He wasn't going to come. And his executive assistant, Norma Zendejas, actually called us up and said, hey, can we still maybe squeeze Senator De Leon in? And he rushed all the way out here just to talk to you guys. So if we could give him one more round of applause. And last but not least, a local guy, Mr. Cameron Smythe. Cameron Smythe is a California State Assemblyman. He's the chair of the Major Policy Committee, and he's the Republican Caucus Chair, which is the second highest ranking Republican position in the State Assembly. So if we all give him a round of applause. And isn't that nice to see a Republican and a Democrat getting along, shaking hands, patting backs? Excellent. So without further ado, if we could ask everyone to be respectful of everyone's point of views tonight. Obviously California faces a lot of different challenges and there's obviously a lot of different solutions. But everyone was nice enough to not only come and talk about it in front of all you, but even stick around even though we didn't expect as much as, or we expected maybe a little bit more people. But I guess in the, for the sake of freedom of speech, if we could respect theirs. And if you're a student organization or just a student and you want to put on events like this or do different things on campus, come to the Associate Students Office. You can do something just like this too, and if you'd also like to have your voice heard in one manner, way, or another, we can get an event going for you as well. So without further ado, I will hand it over to John Biltz and we'll get this thing going. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and again, I want to thank our guests for coming out, and my name's John, and I'm going to be kind of the main moderator, and then I'm going to hand it off to our other panel over here, and they're going to pose some questions that maybe some of these guests could give us some insightful answers. But first, I think it's very appropriate to start by rising and saying our Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so to start with, we can talk about a few topics here. What we really want to start with is issues that face CSU Northridge specifically, and then generally higher education. And so on those topics, I would like to hand it over to our student moderator, Nellie Altamirano, excuse me, and she will pose the first question.
This question is for Mr. De Leon. Currently, Governor Jerry Brown has requested for budget cuts to be made to social programs such as, wrong question. Currently, the state of California is in a deficit of over $9.2 billion, according to Governor Jerry Brown. How should we move forward with California, and what long-term solutions are there to help lower this deficit?
That's a very good question. Obviously, we're dealing with a very difficult period, especially for those who historically been marginalized in the state of California, with the most vulnerable single mothers with children. immigrants, the blind and disabled, and in this case here at Cal State Northridge, college-age students. We have roughly about a $9.2 billion budget deficit in the current year. It is relatively a lot better, if you will, if you can even say that, in comparison to last year. Last year was roughly about $25 billion budget deficit, so there were a lot of draconian cuts that were made, extremely painful cuts, and the reality was is that the cuts were made and the budget was balanced on the backs of many of the college students throughout the state of California, whether you attend a community college, or you attend a Cal State University school, or you attend a University of California, at 3 levels of higher education. One of the biggest things that are facing us right now to stave off more cuts is a revenue package that the governor and the members of the legislature have negotiated together. Those in the audience may know there was 3 proposed ballot measures for the fall. There was Governor Jerry Brown's package. There was the California Federation of Teachers, which is the millionaire's tax. And there's a woman by the name of Molly Munger, a very wealthy woman here from Pasadena, who's moving forward with her measure. There was a negotiated deal between the governor, ourselves, and the California Federation of Teachers to combine the measures, because there was deep fear that if you have all these revenue measures, that the voters would ultimately say no to all of them, because there would be a lot of confusion. The idea is, with the revenue measures, is to take the revenue measures, if it is passed by those who are in the audience who are voters and by your family members, we can stave off a lot of the cuts. The reason why the cuts happen is that per the Constitution in California, you have to have a balanced budget on an annual basis. Unlike Washington, D.C., the federal government, when they run ongoing federal deficits, that's why you have $1 trillion deficit in the United States, and you can print money in the Treasury. We don't have that ability in the state of California. Every single year, you have to balance that budget, regardless if you have money or you don't have money. And that's what puts a lot of folks in a very difficult position. So, you know, I'll stop at that, because I know you have a lot of questions, a lot of great participants. But we're going to move forward with this ballot initiative in the fall, and it's worth about maybe about $8 billion. If we can get that, a lot of that money is going to education, to stave off and backfill a lot of cuts that have taken place in previous years.
Senator De Leon, you say that we have to have a balanced budget per the Constitution, but you also mentioned that we have what did you say, $9.2 billion deficit? So how does that play in with the Constitution? Are we just running that deficit up through the year and we're realizing, hey, we're running out of money? Is that what's going on, or is it more of we're borrowing money from certain places to pay and balance that budget?
That's a good question. Let me try to simplify this. So, say for example, the budget for the state of California is $100 billion. $100 billion. And in that $100 billion, you have higher education. Cal State's community colleges, University of California. You have healthcare. You have the prisons. You have parks. You have the environment. You have everything imaginable, DMV, all the state services, $100 billion. In a given year, if you have, with regards to revenues coming to the state of California, you have $80 billion that came in. That's a $20 billion differential. So when you have a deficit, I'm just using that number as an example. So when you have a $20 billion differential with regards to your deficit, you have to figure out how to make up the difference. You're either going to do A, make cuts, $20 billion worth of cuts, or B, you're going to either raise taxes, or C, you're going to do a combination thereof. Those are your 3 choices. You know, and Cameron will talk more, but those are the 3 choices on the table. Each choice is very political, and each choice has a lot of risk and rewards and what you can accomplish both in the legislature and outside with the voters. And obviously we can talk about that much more in detail in a bit, but that's to give you a very simplistic sort of breakdown, if you will. So we have this year $9 billion worth of deficit. Last year we had $25 billion, and the reason why we still have a deficit is we don't have enough revenues coming to the state of California. Why? Because a lot of people lost their jobs. Why? A lot of people lost their homes. Why? A lot of people with the derivatives and the hedge funds and Wall Street, People on Wall Street made out, like bandits and were made whole with the rescue bailout package. But a lot of folks here in California were left holding the bag. So when these folks lose their jobs, they lose the ability to pay taxes. When you lose the ability to pay taxes, there's no money that comes into the state of California. When there's no money that comes into the state of California, someone who has HIV, and it's not a question of if she has an HMO or PPO, or she's getting her medication, she has no plan because she's poor to get her HIV medication. And very difficult choices are made, and that's what's happening right now. That's sort of what's being manifested at the statewide level.
And Senator Smythe, Senator Smythe.
Senator's fine.
Is that the position you take? Are you, Senator De Leon kind of stated that he kind of gave an outline of how revenues are created, and I know that from the Republican side of the aisle, that's definitely a school of thought of how revenues created and sort of cutting taxes versus raising them. And I know that there's a special, there's an election here coming up, and on the ballot is tax increases. What's your opinion on that?
Let me just add one thing, if you may. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Yeah. I didn't so we know clear. I didn't state an opinion. What I stated were facts. It was not a subjective opinion that went with anything that I said. That's why I said later on, I'll give an opinion, how we should do it. We're going to differ. Folks may differ here with me. But I just stated the facts of what we're dealing with in terms of what's in front of us. So I just want to make that clear right there.
I was going to say that. First, I do just want to take a quick second and thank everyone for putting this together and for everyone to show and turn out. My district is, this is as close to my district as we can get. My district cuts off in Devonshire. So the number one university for my district is certainly is CSUN, and just to prove that all roads, as I found, lead to kind of my district, and that my wife got her master's here. Billy, when he was introducing, went to high school with a member of my staff, and Ms. Flavin's aunt was the photographer at my wedding. And I'm still married to the same girl, so that's wanted to pass that along. But Senator De Leon was exactly right, and I was joking, but I was going to state that he laid out the very facts that he said and the issues that we're facing, and it is difficult, as the senator said, because California has that constitutional requirement to balance our budget. Unlike the federal government, like you said, run a deficit or print money, local governments can declare bankruptcy. Cities, counties, other agencies. And quite frankly, that would have been the best option for California several years ago, was to be able to just declare bankruptcy, take a break, take a deep breath, and look at how we budget and how we allocate and how we spend our money. But we don't have that luxury. So every year, we're just battling another cut and another lack of revenue. And it's always kind of a bandage approach, and we feel like we're just doing triage in the field to just get us through to the next year and not be able to do that long-term planning. And that's a challenge that we face every year. Certainly, the options are accurate, that you can cut, you can raise taxes, the combination thereof. In my 5+ years in the legislature, we've done all three of those have been tried, and to varying degrees of success. And I do have concern about banking on the voters passing the revenue plan in November, asking the voters to increase income tax on individuals. That's the main component. The individuals making $250,000 more a year, but there's also a sales tax on as part of that, and that hits everybody. And in LA, in the city of LA, we already have one of the higher sales tax in the county, in the country. And then you add on this measure, if it passes, it will increase the sales tax. But also Mayor Villaraigosa is looking at making Measure R, which is a sales tax measure permanent, it's going to push us close to 10% sales tax. And at that point, you start getting negative returns in that buying a car in Thousand Oaks, 2%, 3% is significant when you're making a big purchase like a vehicle. And so, you have to be concerned about that. The voters have had the opportunity to extend tax that was passed in 2009 on a bipartisan effort, and it was put to the ballot to let voters extend that. Unfortunately, they voted that down, and so I think it's going to be tough to keep going to the well, because the truth is there's no one more mobile than a millionaire in their money, and at some point we see an erosion of the business sector. I've got better experts than I on the panel, but ultimately, every person has their threshold. And I always use the example of Tiger Woods and the Williams sisters, who were both California kids that at their prime were businesses of $500 to $700 million, but they live in Florida. They don't live in California, even though they grew up here and went to school here. And we continue to have that erosion, and I worry about that. Those job creators that are going to give you guys jobs when you get out, they're not going to be here in California, or they're not going to be here in the Valley. And we want to keep you here. And I would rather have more people paying taxes. And I know, Sarah, we want to have more jobs, so have more people paying taxes to spread out that tax base, so we don't have to we're not faced with making some of these horrific cuts that even the most conservative member of the legislature did not go up there to do. And we have to work together and able to solve those.
Thank you. So I just want to ask just kind of prod a little bit into that. Can I ask a question? Yeah, you absolutely can. Actually, why don't you take this one and then, or you take a question that you might want to direct to somebody.
Awesome. First of all, I just want to say it is an honor for me to be here in front of all you guys, especially like you guys. It's an honor, it's very humbling. So if I do stutter or stumble over a couple of words, it's because I know you guys are nervous, and I'm trying to make you guys feel a little more, I'm trying to make you guys feel better about this situation. No, but kind of going off of what you just said, I'm going to ask this question to Kobe King. I do want to know, so according to a survey by the California Foundation of Commerce and Education, 87% of executives at California companies that operate in several states, other than California, say that California is hard to do business. Can you repeat that? Yeah. Okay, so what ideas do you have to offer to make California more inviting for executives and entrepreneurs?
Well, thank you. Let me also, before I answer that question, let me also thank CSUN. I've got a couple of connections to this university. I actually attended here for a couple of years before I transferred to that little school over the hill in Westwood. But I enjoyed my years in Northridge. That was back when the orange grove was really an orange grove, and it was so thick that you could literally get out of the noontime heat and not and be completely in shade. It was a very different place. You guys are very fortunate that the capital funds have been here to reconstruct this university after the earthquake, and now with all the new construction, it's really a remarkable place. And I mean, we all know what an economic treasure this university is. It's the only four-year public university north of the 101 in all of LA County, probably. So I think you have to go pretty far north to get to it, and west or east to get to the university. So let me also make one minor correction, which you wouldn't have known because this week I did start a new job. I'm no longer at MWW. I'm at Eck & Eck, and I know that my new firm would like me to mention that. In terms of, and finally, before I answer the question, I do want to explain. I was introduced as the chair-elect of VICA. It's the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, and what VICA does is we're the Valley's advocate for business. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is our role is to try to promote a positive business climate, which I think actually dovetails right nicely into your question. What do business executives want? What's wrong with California? I mean, California does have some problems. And yes, I mean, if you, there was the famous incident not too long ago where Governor Rick Perry would put billboards in Los Angeles, wouldn't you like to come to Texas? Well, I know I don't want to go to Texas, I'm still here. But the truth of the matter is, California's business climate is probably not as friendly as it could be. And we are losing a lot of businesses to Texas, and so we need to take a pretty hard look at the policies that we're following and what we can do to improve it. And it's not just taxes. I mean, I know that I personally understand that taxes are the price that we pay for a civilized society, and that the government services that taxes pay for are critical services. We do have to care for the poor. We do have to educate people. We do have to provide for law enforcement. I mean, all these things don't come out of nowhere. They come out of our taxes. But there are probably some practical things that we can do both with the budget, so that we can do more with less, and things that we could do to improve the business climate. On the budget side, I mean, I know that there are struggles over this. Getting away from an income tax, such a reliance on the income tax, is something that's really good. We here in California continue to rely too much on income tax. So the problem with relying on income tax is that it tends to be pretty volatile. And the reason it tends to be pretty volatile is that we have a progressive income tax in California, and so the rich tend to pay a proportionally higher share. Now, in principle, there's really nothing wrong with that, but except for the fact that rich people's income tends to go up and down, not quite as much as the middle class and the lower class. And when, like during a real estate depression or the recession that we've been in recently, we end up in the kind of trouble that we're in right now. Nobody likes a sales tax. It's rather regressive, but it's a more stable form of income. And if we do have to find ways of stabilizing our income, we need to look at things that are not going to change so much from year to year. Another idea that could help with the budget and perhaps improve the business climate would be to go to a zero-based budgeting method, where we seriously look at all the different programs and services that are being provided by the state, and we see whether or not they're working. I mean, these are tough things to do, and I'm not going to claim that there's a ton of waste in the state budget. We'll always claim that, but it's hard to find. But if you do go through and you provide and you apply performance standards to the various state agencies, there are probably ways where some wasteful programs can be cut. In terms of the business climate, there's a number of other ideas. California has always had extremely strong worker protections, and that's a good thing. It makes it a great place to work. But in these times when technology is moving so quickly, maybe there's some room for some opening up of some of those rules. Maybe provide, instead of a straight 8-hour day, maybe a 40-hour week, where employers have some flexibility to ask people to work 10 hours a day for 4 days or something like that. I mean, there's a variety of these kinds of rules that, while you don't want to gut the worker protections that are in place, you do want to give employers more flexibility so that their workers can be more productive and they can feel like California is a welcoming place. Just a couple of ideas on how we can improve the business climate in California.
Awesome, thank you. So from that same perspective, I would like to get Mr. Andrews, I would like to get your opinions and your perspectives as a small business owner, as owning various restaurants throughout California. What is your opinion on attracting, from a small business perspective, what is your opinion on California's competitiveness with other states?
I'll slide it. Thank you also for having me. I don't know how many people here have been to a wood ranch. If you haven't, I'll be happy to give you directions to the closest one up the street. You know, we celebrated on Friday, I think Friday was the 27th of April, and last week, and we celebrated our 20th anniversary having opened. Thank you. We opened, my best friend and I have been partners for 20 years. We opened in Moore Park, not too far from here, unless you're driving at this time of night. And I have to say that if given the choice today, if we had a choice to open here or open in probably 35 or 40 other states, I might take my chances starting somewhere else. I love living here. My children love living here. My family loves living here. I know that, and we've done well here. But I'm looking at it from your perspective. I just don't think that when we started, my best friend and I were willing to work 100 hours, and literally we each brought $40,000 to the table, and we found a restaurant in Moore Park that had been opened and closed. It was a failed restaurant, and we were able to open. We literally started the business with $80,000. And that was borrowed money. So the first thing we did was we paid back our parents within 6 months as quickly as we could, and then we just worked. And I know I'm a little bit older than most people here also, but when I was 18, 19, 20, a lot of what I learned and I apply to work today, I learned in internships in various places that were offered to me. So when I look at California, and I know several students from CSUN work for us here in Northridge, as you get through your education and you want to learn about management, you want to learn other opportunities than maybe just coming and serving or hosting, we can't give you a complimentary, a free internship so you can develop your skills. Now that's just one little thing, but I think while it probably does protect some people, it really limits a lot of people, like I would have been limited, because of an employer isn't going to just pick up people that don't necessarily have the skills to add something if they're going to have to pay for it. And for us, we try to be creative, especially with people that are working with us, to go ahead and just create, I call them internal scholarships, where we just budget for it because we want to give back, and we know that the majority of people that work for us are between my age and your age. And so I know it's important, and my partner knows it's important, that we do kind of feed the mind. And as an example, 4 of our general managers today started with us when they were 16 years old. They went to school and they came back, but during the time that they worked for us, they came to the home office. We paid them for it, so they could just get a sense of how does the big picture work? Not how do I serve a table, but how do I operate a business? And someone gave me that gift when I was 18, 19, 20. And I think, for example, having more flexible work rules that would allow companies like, we're just a small company, but even larger companies to really give internships an opportunity and have limits so there aren't abuses of that. I mean, we don't want to give an intern the job that my assistant should be doing. But certainly to give them the opportunity to sit in on meetings, go to restaurant visits with us, just kind of get a better picture of what the opportunity really is, I think would be just one example of something that can be really terrific. And right now, we can't.
President Flavin, what's your perspective from this as a business student?
Well, I'm obviously the least qualified to answer this question because I'm still in college, but my dad is actually a small business owner in California, and over the last year, business and construction business in particular has taken quite a decline in California. And there's 2 kinds of problems for a small business owner from my perspective. There's the declining economy, and then there's the rising of regulations. And in California, every year, no offense to our lovely guest, but the state legislator comes up with a whole new list of rules on how to operate in California. And businesses just can't keep up with all the regulations that come out of Sacramento. And with the decline in revenues and the increase in regulations, there's just no way for a small business to operate. And there's no incentive to operate in California. Why would a business choose to start up here where there is the highest income tax, where there is some of the worst regulations, whether they're environmental regulations or work regulations? Why not go to Nevada or Texas? The sunshine is only worth so much, and when people can't afford to live here, can't afford to buy a house here, why would anyone want to work here?
Senator De Leon, does that fit with your opinions?
I find there's a very interesting theme going down this whole panel from here to here tonight. I think there's some very legitimate questions that we should tackle with regards to regulations, no doubt. And I think that we should collectively have an opportunity to review with the executive branch many of the regulations, and we should streamline them so that we can make it much more efficient so small businesses can flourish. There's no doubt about it. I agree with that. Also, too, I want to say that we do have regulations for certain reasons. There's called discrimination, racism, discrimination against women and gender issues. Those are handicapped. There are certain reasons why we do have certain regulations. Clean air, clean water. Texas is used as a model. I would argue that Texas is the China of the United States. Low wages, like you cannot imagine. Worker protections doesn't exist at all whatsoever. Those folks who want to go to Texas, obviously, they have the ability, the right to go to Texas. California is a much better place than the state of Texas. Again, I would say Texas is the China of the United States. Well, yeah, you're right. A lot of folks with low-wage jobs go there. They've had an increase in jobs, and those jobs have been minimum wage jobs. And these are not the types of jobs that you all want in this audience. The issue of taxes, it's a volatile issue, no doubt. Colby makes a very good point with regards to personal income tax and how volatile it becomes. If you're wealthy, you make lots of money, capital gains taxes, state gets more revenue. During a very bad economic period, when people lose money, you know, they pay less taxes, there's less money in the revenue. So our budgets are tied to that. And he makes a very valuable point that we have to have an open discussion. Conversely, you say, well, everyone should sort of share, if you will, the tax burden. And not have a progressive tax, because progressive tax touches you less. If you want to get rid of progressive tax, then you all in this audience, and when you graduate, are going to have to pay more taxes. So the issue is, and I do agree, I think the sales tax is regressive. I do agree with that, no doubt about it, you know. But then, if you start lowering it, flagging it, just be mindful about one thing. You all in this audience start paying more taxes. So it is a part of a great debate we should have, no doubt about it, because there's different philosophical minds, and that's something that we're all grappling with, you know. Should wealthy people pay more taxes? And the issue of during bad economic years, it's feast or it's famine. When the economy is booming, man, there's lots of money. And when it's a famine and it's down, there's lots of cuts. And we've got to deal with that structural issue. We've got to figure out how we're going to do this. Not everyone will be happy, but we're going to have to find, if we can find, some sort of happy medium, some consensus. So it's a lot more complicated. Either, tax the wealthy, or you're going to tax everybody else. That means that wealthy pay less taxes. And that's a big philosophical debate that we're grappling with right now. I know Cameron and I up in Sacramento, and folks hold strong to their opinions. Some folks are a little more consensus building. I'm a little more consensus building, and I think Cameron is too. Cameron, in my opinion, tends to be one of the more moderate voices in the Capitol and a more reasonable voice in the Capitol. So yeah, we do grapple with that issue, no doubt about it. So.
Senator Smith, real quick, I just wanted to get another response from you, and then we're going to move on to the next topic. But what are your opinions on that?
I'm happy to be the voice of reason, as Senator Leo pointed out. Now, just keep in mind, just a statistic on income tax, since we're kind of that seems to be a topic. That once you make $48,000 a year in California, you'll be taxed at about 9% state income tax level, which is the highest income tax, state income tax at the lowest level in the country, if that makes sense. So the definition of rich in California could be, it's debatable. And so just keep that in mind when we talk about the tax. And I think if we had if I could wave the wand, I mean, it'd be great if we had the time to just stop and think about how we redo our taxes. Because, again, the volatility that's been mentioned, because the state is so heavily dependent on personal income tax and sales tax, that that's why you see huge times when things are good and we have huge surpluses, and then we end up in the deep valleys like we are now. Some simple things we can do, I think. Rainy day fund, basically reserve, I think is not unreasonable to have, and I believe the governor has that in part of his budget that I'm certainly willing to support. That we look at when times are good. We don't spend it all either in spending new programs or in tax breaks, which we did last time we had the .com boom. We were at both sides of the legislature before Senator De Leon and I were there, but both sides basically gave it away. Republicans wanted to give tax rebates and tax refunds. That was done. Democrats wanted to add more spending on their side. So we ended up, both sides, instead of putting money away, used it for their own constituencies, and then everything fell apart and we didn't have a reserve. And we were forced to make, they were all turned out and we were left to make the decisions. And that's the nature of the beast. But I think that regardless of political sides, we all realize that we're in this together in the Capitol. Nobody differentiates between Senator De Leon or Assemblymember Smythe, but when we're sitting at a 9–10% approval rating, that's all of us. And we need to work together to try to turn that up so that the people that follow us in the legislature are not left with the bag. But just one last comment too on the legislation that Ms. Flavin brought up. And I think it's a good point. I mean, last year alone, over 700 new laws were signed by Governor Brown. Now, 693, I don't know if they were needed. The 7 that were mine, of course, were really important. So we needed those 7. But you get to that point where is that a lot of them are pretty small and cleanup measures, and you need to do that. But she makes a good point about employers trying to keep up and with all the new regs so that they can meet and make sure that you guys have jobs. And I absolutely agree that we have to have protections in place. Growing up here in the valley, I always knew whether we were going to have football practice or not because we could see whether you could see the mountains or the swamp. If you saw the swamp, if you couldn't see the mountains, there wasn't going to be practice. And it's those type of regulations that were put in place to clean that up. And I don't find those issues of clean air, clean water in any way contradictory to my conservative principles. But it's finding that balance, that sweet spot that the Senator brought up, that we need to find to make sure that we are having those protections, or we're giving business owners and employers the opportunity to flourish.
Okay, so I want to relate this to the economy and kind of bring the economy aspect of it into it. But real quick, President Flavin, do you have a question, and then we'll move on to Ms. Altimer.
I don't have a question, I just have a response to that. I think I can agree with you, Ms. Smythe, that back in the day when you couldn't see through the smog, it was horrible living in the valley. But I think that most of us in our generation haven't experienced that because we've been benefited from those initial regulations that cleaned up the air in the valley. But I think that some of the regulations that California has taken recently have gone so far beyond the need to clean up air and have tried to be the heroes of the world. When we're here in California, we're losing jobs to China because we're trying to clean up the air in California. It's not helping when China's building 3, 4, 5 times as many factories because they're not building them here in California. So are we really doing the environment any justice by creating so many regulations that all the businesses who say, well, that's great, California, good job, let's just go to China? I mean, are we really helping the environment by doing that?
An example that I use is the Prius manufacturing. Toyota had a manufacturing plant that was manufacturing the Prius in the Bay Area. And they picked up and left to, I believe it was Mississippi, because of the deal that they were given, land and property and tax breaks. And never mind the fact that 80% of Priuses or Prius were sold in California. So they were manufactured in the South, and then plane, train, or automobile shipped back to California. And so our global footprint was probably, was less, and that's been a lesson learned. Another industry Senator De Leon and I fought to keep. The entertainment industry is the top employer in my district and very close to the senators. And when we were coming up, it didn't matter if you had a GED or a PhD, you could get a job in the entertainment industry, and a good job. and a long-term job. Similar to some of your parents, when they were coming up, it was the aerospace industry here in the Valley and in California. They had those same opportunities, but the aerospace industry has left to a large degree, and now the entertainment industry is leaving as well. And Senator De Leon and I have carried legislation to provide tax incentives and tax breaks to keep those jobs here and keep people here. And that's the type of cooperation that we need, because we're going to lose those jobs. For you guys, when you come out, they're not going to be here. And we need more of that type of effort to bring them home.
Let me add something for President Flavin. It's not an either-or equation, so it's not a black and white, because they're not mutually exclusive. Let me put this in context. In my district, I have 6 major freeways: the 2, the 5, the 10, the 101, the 110, and the 710. So I have 6 major freeways that crisscross. We have the largest port in the nation, which is the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach combined. So when we have goods movement coming in from the Pacific Rim, specifically from China, when they reach the Port of Los Angeles, and let's say they unload the cargo and they go through the 710 freeway or the 110 freeway, and they go up through Lincoln Heights, they go up through Boyle Heights, they go through Cypress Park and other areas. When they unload farther up north in Lancaster area, Palmdale area, and they transfer the cargo boxes and they go to Paducah, Kentucky, or Bloomington, Indiana. And when someone goes to Target or to a Walmart and they buy a flat screen television set or Hanes underwear or socks, that goods movement came through the Port of Los Angeles. And it's the children, minority children, children of low income, who had to breathe all the knocks and the socks in a particulate matter 2.5 that gets lodged into their lungs. So the price points that are subsidized, very low, for someone in Paducah, Kentucky to buy their socks. Oh, the South is so great. The children in a district such as mine had to pay that price and subsidize it with their public health. And they end up in County USC Medical Center in the emergency room because of the high asthma rates. And because they have high asthma rates, they miss school. So this is not an issue that's mutually exclusive. You got to find that balance. And when you can find that balance, you can figure out, because you're a small business owner, you have much more experience. You've been there, you're on the ground. So there's many things that you can tell us, and you can say, we need to do this, this, and this, and this, and do it better, to streamline it, make it much more efficient. So I can just run a business better, I can have a bigger payroll, so I can employ more folks. You employ more folks are paying taxes, more revenue to the state, more revenue to the state, we can fund our schools. See, it's not like, the sound bite here, this there, we go to Texas here. If things were that simple, I'd say, hey, it'd be much more simple. It's a lot more complex. This is $1 trillion economy, the state of California. It's $100 billion plus budget. And with everything we've talked about, California is still the largest economy in the whole nation, in the entire nation. Much bigger than Texas, much bigger than the Republic of Mexico and all the Central American nations combined, put together. So we do have challenges, no doubt about it, and we're going to have to tackle them head on. And I think that we have a new generation of leaders who are a little more moderate too, who want to tackle it and will agree, says we got to figure out how can we get clean air, but at the same time, how can we create more jobs and save jobs that we currently have, as opposed to have that pendulum go swing from one extreme to another extreme. And it's how do we find that balance? And that's the challenge we're in right now. And I'm looking forward to it because I want to do it, because I need clean air in my district for my kids, but at the same time, I need to make sure I have folks employed. Because Cameron said something that was right on target. There was a generation, you didn't need a college diploma. You didn't have to go to UCLA or Cal State Northridge. A good union job, high school diploma, GED, with the union, aerospace industry, wherever it is, you could buy a house, no matter how humble your house is, or was, it was your house. Now we live in a generation now that it's very pernicious. It's a very mean-spirited society that if you have little or no education, you're punished most severely. How are you punished? In a service industry job. That's how you're punished. Or you're punished because you end up in corrections, in prison. Or you're punished because you're on welfare. So now we have a very high education-driven society. And that's just what happened. And that's why we have to find that balance and become much more prepared. That's my spiel. I just wanted to share it with you guys.
Ms. Altamirano?
On the same topic of creating jobs or saving jobs, this question is directed towards Mr. King. According to the LA Times, California's unemployment rate in March increased from 10.9% to 11%, which is only 0.1%, but it's continuing to increase. So, as students of the university, our concern is, students are looking for work as they graduate. What is your opinion on some ways that we can stop the rising of unemployment, and what can be done to create more jobs?
Well, that's an easy question. Thank you for asking it. I do first want to say that I know that while unemployment in California did jump 0.1%, and while the economic numbers nationally have been mixed over the last month or two, I do feel, looking at the kind of long-term view of the economy in the United States, it does seem like things are moving in the right direction, and I'm pretty pleased by that. And I think that as 2012 goes on and we get into 2013, I think we're going to continue to see productivity gains, and we're going to see the economy coming back, and maybe at some point my home in the West Valley will be the price that will be worth what I paid for it. So hopefully we'll see at some point that happens. In terms of unemployment, look, a lot of the things that we've talked about today are all things that can contribute to getting the economy going again. I mean, I do find myself in looking at the economy of major urban areas and places like the San Fernando Valley. They really, I mean, I actually agree completely with Senator De Leon. The economy in Los Angeles is never, or is not any longer going to be, especially in the Valley, it's not going to be a manufacturing economy anymore. Those jobs, I hate to say it, are probably gone and may not be coming back. I mean, it is important, and I know VICA feels very strongly that preserving the industrial space that we have in the Valley, in other words, not letting industrial land be converted to commercial or residential, is critical to keeping employment up. We need to continue to provide governmental incentives, I think, for manufacturing, for light industrial, for the kinds of things so that people that don't necessarily have higher education degrees can fill. But at the same time, it seems to me that it all comes back to one thing, and that one thing is higher education. And here in California, as I think you all know, we have three levels of higher education. We have the UCs, the Cal States, and the community colleges. And here in the Valley, I think and throughout LA County, it's really important to remember that all of these systems are being cut, and that while there are employers, especially in the San Fernando Valley, which tends to be a small employer economy, there really are fewer and fewer large companies operating in the Valley any longer, especially for the higher paid jobs. A lot of those service jobs, healthcare is also a big industry in the Valley that's going to continue to grow. We're continuing to encourage tech and high-tech industries and clean tech industries, but a lot of those folks need technicians and nurses and folks like that, and those folks are coming out of the community colleges to a great extent, and out of the Cal States, and we need, I'll leave it to these two guys to try to figure out how we continue to fund higher education, because it seems to me that if we don't continue to fund higher education, we're literally cutting off our noses to spite our faces. The economy will stall if we don't find a way of providing the training and the education for the people in our area so that they can be qualified for the kinds of jobs that our economy is producing. Our economy is producing good jobs, and as we come out of the recession, it's going to provide better jobs. But the question for me is, are those employers going to be able to find qualified people to fill those jobs? And where those qualified people come from is from the higher education system. I do want to call out Steve Veras, who sits on the board of the LA Community College District. Steve, you could just stand for a moment. I mean, I know he faces these issues every single day. The budget cuts that the community colleges, that all the higher education, in fact K through 12 as well, that we're facing in education in the state is just a tragedy. And we've got to figure out a way to fund education, or the economy, the recovering economy will stall out, in my view.
President Flavin, did you have a question?
So just kind of piggyback off of that, your last statement, I'm going to direct this question to State Assembly Smith. It's kind of a twofold question, but what are your feelings towards tuition increases? And if tuition increases don't happen, what are our other options to keep California schools funded?
Tuition increases.
We're just solving it right there. No, I think that I agree that public education, university education, is absolutely key. And the time when getting that from here in California, affordable education is absolutely critical. Right? It's counterintuitive when the UC system is actively recruiting out-of-state applicants, so they'll pay because they pay a higher tuition. And what ends up happening is that those kids, more than likely will end up going back to their home state. And that is absolutely backwards. I think there are ways to prioritize. One thing to keep in mind on the state budget is very little of it is actually negotiable, if you will. Much of the state's budget is already allocated through propositions and ballot initiatives. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as you vote on election day and you look at those propositions and ballot initiatives, because they do tie up a significant part of the budget. For good or bad, 40% of the state budget off the top goes to K-14, right off the top. So there, the pool is narrow. So we have to look at other ways to fund it aside from just tuition increases. I think it's very poor judgment on our university systems to be paying their administrators at a high level. I think it's wrong for our UC administrators to be suing for higher pay at times like this. That's not the leadership that we need. I come from a city, I was on the city council with the mayor in Santa Clarita, where we spent more money on our Parks and Rec system than we did on law enforcement. And Santa Clarita remained one of the 5 safest cities in the country. And I don't believe in California we need to spend $50,000 per prisoner in our system. There are ways that we can find savings there that should be coming to our education system and higher ed. So I think we have to look at those ways, because I just don't think higher taxes or higher fees on students is really the way to go. My wife is a community college professor, and the pressure that puts the students that get priced out of the UCs and CSUs puts increasing pressure on our community college system as well, and that's not going to work. So looking at those, some of those options is a way to begin that discussion. But again, it's not going to be quick. It's not going to be easy, particularly when our budget revenues are as in decline as they are. From when we were elected, first elected, Senator and I were elected back in 2006, the budget in 2007, to maintain that spending level that we were in 2007, the state budget would need to be about $130 billion. Our state budget today is in the mid-80s. So to have that huge of a decline just to maintain where we were in 2007 is unprecedented, certainly, and created challenges that none of us had ever expected that we would face. Doesn't mean that we can't and we shouldn't tackle them. But just to give you, an idea of the gravity of the numbers that we face.
So I just want to clarify. It seems that both, I guess, Republican representation and Democratic Party representation, it seems to recognize the deficit and the amount of spending that we're doing. And like you said, in 2007, we were already in over our heads as far as spending. So what's proposed to us now is we're getting cuts for services, cuts for various things, and we're going to get taxed more?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, no, but I don't mean, but.
So where's the partisan? Where am I seeing a difference, on both sides of the aisle? Is that you guys can agree and we should have this problem fixed soon? Is that what I'm seeing?
Well,
I'm just asking.
Let me add something. Let me say something, because you use a very loaded phrase, in over your heads, or we were in over our heads, which is very, very loaded. And let me clarify a few points. One is, I do strongly believe tuition increase on students is a tax hike on the students. I think it's wrong. And I publicly reprimand the chancellor of the system, Chuck Reed, who's your chancellor, for giving out giveaways to presidents of the Cal State colleges. Just recently, I publicly denounced the salary increase they're going to give to two brand new presidents, one from Cal State East Bay, as well as Cal State, San Diego State, but the one she left from Cal State, Northridge. No, not Northridge, but Dominguez Hills to Cal State Fullerton. I publicly denounced that and sent them a letter, and I asked them not to accept the salary increase. In fact, donate it to the students, and they thumbed their noses at us. So I believe that a tax tuition hike is a tax increase on the students themselves. I believe that the administrators of the Cal State University system can do a much better job with regards to how to balance their own budgets, because they're facing their own mini deficits themselves too, obviously because of the gargantuan economic crisis. What they're doing right now is they're dealing with it in their own island right now, but what they're doing is they're pushing the cuts onto the students. And I think they can do a much better job. They're not making tough decisions that they have to make. But let me say this. The 2007 budget crisis, it was not because, and I do agree, that we have to, no doubt about it, I concur 100%, look at better efficiencies, look at all types of regulations. Some work, a lot work. There are others that don't work. You look at it and say, why did we do this? It doesn't exist anymore, or the problem doesn't exist. We should just remove it altogether so permitting process can be much more efficient and streamlined. We need to do that. But if we leave with the impression that the whole economic crisis was because of that, we'd be sorely mistaken. We have a major economic crisis here because we had a fallout in our housing industry. And we had a fallout in the housing industry with construction and builders because we had subprimes loans, we had derivatives and hedge funds that were sliced and diced, sold on a worldwide market. Then all of a sudden the bottom blew out. Lehman Brothers, all those individuals selling very fancy, exotic financial products. And then the whole world went to a global crisis. Who was impacted disproportionately by that? The state of California. Michigan, Nevada, Florida, where there was a large housing boom, and then people lost their homes, and that's why we're in this financial debacle right now. Now, there were structural problems previous to that, but we could have weathered that. There's no doubt about that. We could have weathered that. But this was an economic crisis of such proportions that we had never seen. And I don't think there's anyone here old enough to have lived through the Great Depression. Since the Great Depression, this is the second biggest economic crisis in this country's history, in the world history. So what takes place in Greece now, what takes place in Spain, and other parts of the world has had a severe impact on the state of California. So I just want to make sure we don't simplify this or dumb this down in such a manner. This is a gargantuan economic crisis. This is my opponent right here, Cameron Smythe. We don't agree on a lot of stuff, but I respect him. But I know Cameron Smythe did create this economic crisis. And Cameron knows at the end of the day, I didn't create this economic crisis. We came in and boom, it was right there staring us on the face. Then you say, okay, you got $80 billion. You got to make a decision. You're going to cut the kids, you're going to cut the HIV people, you're going to cut those who have Alzheimer's, you're going to cut those who are poor. What are you going to do? Well, let's try to raise revenue, if you will. No, we don't want to raise taxes. So there's this struggle debate, and it plays out in the public, it plays out among students themselves. And it's important to hear your opinion too. Should we raise taxes? Should we not raise taxes? There's an argument to be made. Personal income tax, you say it's unfair on the wealthy. Well, let's do services then, perhaps. You get a haircut, right? You notice that when you go get a haircut, you're not charged tax. When you go get ladies, and some of the guys too perhaps, when you go get your nails done, no taxes in the beauty salon. So some folks say, we gotta make this fair. We gotta start charging taxes there permanently. And I can see some folks in the audience say, oh no, we don't want that. You see? So this is a time where we should hear also too, if we raise revenue, where should we raise it? Some folks say, I don't want you to raise taxes, raise it on them. And other folks say, don't raise it on me, raise it on them. Or raise it on restaurants, what have you, etc. They say, no, we don't want to raise it on restaurants, you know? Because we want them to be full and busy too. But I just want to throw in my 2 cents with regards to that.
No, and I don't intend to dumb it down.
No, I didn't mean you were dumbing it down.
Yeah, but I do think that we have a very good expert on the panel here, Mr. Andrews, as far as the economic crisis and in what ways that impacted your restaurants and possibly, you know, the economic effects of that with regulations and taxes. What's your opinion on it?
I'm hoping not to insult anybody, and I'm certainly not an expert in politics, even though I was a major way back when in poli-sci. But I think that all of us can relate to if any of our families have an economic crisis. I have 2 children and they get a $5 and $10 a week allowance. If I lose my job, we're all going to sit around the family table, we're going to pull together, and we're going to do what we need to do. Because tomorrow the sun's going to rise and life's going to go on. I think that what happens in Sacramento is so unreasonable and full of special interests that instead of coming together, what happens is that the money that flows into political campaigns really, at best, creates the impression of there's a conflict of interest, at best. And at worst, it absolutely influences what goes on. So whether you're conservative, whether you're a pro-union, whether you're pro-law enforcement, whether you're a correctional officer, a teacher, whatever, everybody is basically, free speech is given as cash. And it's a constitutional issue, really, that deals with, you know, I don't remember what year it was, but the federal government has had, obviously we all deal with the Constitution, and the Supreme Court ruled that, that free speech equals money. And so this whole campaign financing is just, in my opinion, as a small business owner, you look at what goes on, and it's not people with great consciences that get into politics because they really want to stand up for children and this and that. But you get there, and if you don't play the game, it's hard to make things happen. And I'd rather listen than preach, because I read the LA Times, I go on the internet just like all of you, but it's hard when you see if it's $50,000 a year to care for a prisoner, and we're talking about raising student fees. It's hard to believe that that's what it costs until you look at possibly there's the amount of money given by the correctional officers unions, or by teachers unions, or by business groups for that matter. So I think that I try to look at things from a bigger picture and not just item by item. And I think if we could do something about campaign finances and special interests, and really take back to the voters. I do think propositions are very dangerous. I think we should elect our officials and hold them accountable, period. So from a business perspective, what all of this creates is, in my mind, just, I'm afraid to go out and make commitments. I'm afraid to go out and invest $2 or $3 million to open a restaurant like we did in Corona, where we're down there in 2005, and it's booming. Everybody that gets priced out of Orange County is moving to Corona. And I remember going out there, and I'm down on the 15 freeway, and I'm just thinking, I don't get it. People are buying $1 million homes out here on a golf course. I walk the home, and I'm thinking, this is a $300,000 or $400,000 house. I don't understand it. And sure enough, we open, and you know, a couple of years later, and it's our best opening ever. Right? There's a 3-hour line out the door. 2 years later, we're doing half the sales that we did. Yet we committed $3 million to open that restaurant. We hired 120 people to work there. We moved managers. We moved Miss Oxnard that worked for us since she was 16 to Corona. We put her up in an apartment and everything so that she could lead our management team there.
Well, at least Corona means crown.
Exactly. So, you know, I think that, just again, I'm just a small business guy, but I think that the idea that, that we have to be able to believe and see that there's predictability in the future to the best that we can. You never know. But at least you want to know that, okay, I get it. The minimum wage should keep up with inflation or shouldn't keep up with inflation. It's not that big of a deal. I think everybody should have a working wage, and I know my business partner does. No one at Wood Ranch makes minimum wage unless you're a tipped employee. So I think all those things are great, but let's make those decisions because we think they're the right thing, not because of a special interest telling you with money, that's what I want you to do.
I just wanted to comment on a couple of things that were said. I understand the criticism that you both often take because I'm also an elected official and have some very angry constituents at times who would agree with you that our presidents get paid too much money, that there should be a moratorium on student fees, and that we should be offering bonuses to encourage presidents to come to the CSU. But I guess my question would be, aren't we changing the topic away from the $750 million cut and taking the focus away from how much money is taken from the CSU and putting it on presidential salaries or putting it on housing expenses or putting it on a moratorium on student fees? And it seems to me like we're blaming the chancellor's office, who's handed the state budget from you. So I'm just curious as to how the level of responsibility is passed down, because you craft a budget and say, here you go, Chancellor, and then the Board of Trustees says, well, we don't have enough money to fund all these students. So now, I mean, I just am curious how the blame goes and why we're talking about salary increases and why we're talking about, bonuses when really there's a $750 million problem, not a $300,000 salary from San Diego.
Again, when you're dealing with a limited amount of resources that the state has as well, it's only natural that anyone that depends on the state is going to receive less. All the way, whether it's the CSUs, all the way down to Californians with disabilities that get their checks are cut, and unfortunately, that is the circumstance. And so, one way to cover that, as just like the chancellors and the CSUs, they get their budget, from the state. We kind of get our budget, from tax revenues, and then we have to make our decisions. And it becomes a budgeting priority. In all honesty, budgeting the budget is your priority. Again, keep in mind that a majority of the budget is already accounted for. If we could undo some of the commitments and propositions to free up that money, that would help allow us to spend more towards the public education or other programs that are taking hits. But when you are limited as much as we are by the Constitution and by the amount of funding that we're receiving, it's inevitable that less money is going to come. Whether it's this, again, whether it's the CSUs or others. And this may not be a real popular answer, but at least the CSU system does have a revenue source in terms of fees. You know, when you go to my son's elementary school, you know, you can't raise fees on, you know, Peachland Avenue Elementary School. You know, we got the PTA, we're trying to do that, they're trying to come out. And you know, it was interesting, a couple of years ago, one of the former CSU presidents made a comment and said that they could triple their tuition rates and still fill every seat in their classroom. So, you know, that's, when you hear that, again, you know, it's a challenge. So I don't think you know, the senator and I are at all trying to shift blame, believe me. You know, I'm turned down. You can blame me all you want for the next 4 months. You know, those are good phone calls I get. If you don't do this, I'm not voting for you in November. Good. I won't be on the ballot in November. So, but those are, you know, it's circumstance, and if you want, you know, if you want to raise taxes, you know, you'll have that opportunity to do that in November. But just keep in mind that taxes are, you know, that the governor's plan does not go all to education. You know, it goes to, you know, the general fund to, you know, support numerous services. I think something we haven't touched on is the issue of pensions and pension reform, which is a huge part of public agency budgets. The city of Vallejo several years ago had to declare bankruptcy because of that. The city of Stockton, one of the largest cities in the country, is on the verge. Mr. DeLeon and I represent a large chunk of LAUSD, and you know, pushing 30% of their budget off the top is going to, you know, pensions and not even seeing the classroom. So you're seeing that at the CSU and UC system as well. We're working with, you know, in a bipartisan manner to solve that, if I reach agreement on pension reform, because that is the long-term elephant in the room, if you will, that will really destroy. You've seen it in Greece, you're seeing it in Spain. It's going to hit us if we don't make changes. And you know, Governor Brown is committed to doing that. I think the Democrat majority is committed. I actually introduced Governor Brown's pension reform plan, carried that as a Republican. So we see that as a critical component to some of the reform and trying to bring some spending into line.
Well, it is getting late, and I know that we have a lot to cover, and we could sit here all day and answer questions, but I just wanted to kind of go down and kind of our closing thoughts on tonight's discussion. If we could start with Mr. King, and we'll just keep it to, in a minute, what would you say to a CSU Northridge student and any advice that you have?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks again to CSUN. I appreciate being invited. You know, one thing we really haven't talked a whole lot about, we've kind of nibbled at the edges on this, and that is, you know, kind of what's going on in Sacramento. And while I know both these elected officials, and they are two of the best elected officials in California, and they are, as they have both said, kind of moderate voices within their caucuses. I mean, look, let's face it, one of the problems that we have in Sacramento right now is that there is some serious gridlock and some serious disagreement on how to move forward and how to balance this revenues versus cuts issue. And I don't, frankly, with the present makeup of the legislature, really see that changing a whole lot this year. But for students who are kind of coming out of college right now, I mean, take a look around you. 2012 is actually a watershed year in California politics. It will, I'm certain, be looked back on as being one of the most important years ever in the history of California politics. And the reason for that is because we have some structural changes that are going to start taking effect this year. And those structural changes involve a new redistricting system, which is now in place, where instead of the previous system, where districts were basically going to be either made up to be either very partisan Republican or very partisan Democrat. We've got a lot more seats now that are actually going to be contested in the fall, and where moderates will be able to attract votes and actually have a chance of being elected. And then the second is the top two system, Prop 14, which will also do the same thing. That will, I mean, I am a moderate but still very partisan Democrat, but I'm glad that in this system you're going to get the ability in both primary and in the general election for people to attract votes from both sides of the aisle. So I'm hopeful for the future of California, and I'm hopeful for the future of Sacramento, and I think that we'll end up getting more people like Cameron and Kevin up in Sacramento so that they can cut the deals. Now, hopefully the term limits measure will also pass, because I happen to think that term limits is one of the reasons we have such gridlock in Sacramento, because people don't really have the time to build the kind of relationships that they need in order to cut deals and kind of get out of their own environment. But so if we can solve that as well, we'll be moving toward solving some of the kind of personal structural issues that I think hold California back. So I do think that things are hopeful. I mean, it's going to be tough this year. I was talking to the leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate the other day, Darrell Steinberg, and he said to me, well, you know, we think we've got one more year of pain, and I think that's still a somewhat hopeful point of view. I hope that he's right. I hope that we can now start moving forward. I do think the economy is going to get better, and I think that people who are graduating, maybe not this year, but maybe in 2013, are really going to be the beneficiaries of a growing economy. And I think that California really, really is coming back, and we just have to all pull together. So good luck to everybody.
I don't know, I'm a little simpler. My parents were born and raised in Cuba. And obviously when Castro came to power, obviously because I'm here today, they left right after the revolution in '61. And they lost everything. They came here with literally, you know, a couple bucks in their pocket. And they rebuilt their lives. So I guess that just, my dad's not here today anymore, but he always gave me perspective that, you know, we're still dealing with, what was it, 73 degrees today, bright sunshine, and you don't have a government telling you where your children are going to go and what you're going to do. So I don't think I'm really old school, because I hope not that I'm not that old, but I do think that, you know, when I was sitting in those seats at UCLA, of course, I just knew I wanted to surround myself with people that were smarter than me, which isn't hard, and I was willing to work. And all I can do is tell you, I'm not going to tell you you should do this, but I feel that just don't count on anybody. Count on yourself. Surround yourself with people that love you and that care about you and that are going to teach you and help mentor you to whatever your dreams are. There's Google out there, there's people out there, there's counselors out there that can help you, but you have to start with the toughest question that I ever had to face, which is, what do I want to do? And if you can answer that, you're all smart enough to figure out where to get the resources to pursue that. But don't let government or other people or anyone tell you that you can't do it and that you're limited. That you can only work 40 hours a week or 8 hours a day. Figure out how to work 15 hours. I assure you that working 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week is simply the price of entry. It is not going to guarantee you anything more than that kind of job. So why settle for that? And I don't know. That's what I would tell my kids. So that's what I'll tell you. Thank you.
First, I want to say it was an honor to come here with you all here at Cal State Northridge. I'm really glad I accepted the invitation. And you know, I would say is that as the youngest child of a single immigrant mother with a third grade education, I'm the only one to graduate, not just from college, but the only one to graduate from high school in my family. And I'm still wildly optimistic of the future for California, even during this very difficult gloom and doom period that we're facing. because it provides us a wonderful opportunity to look at more efficiencies and streamline regulations and what we can do to position ourselves to stimulate the economy and have good jobs in California, sustainable jobs, energy efficiency, and clean technology jobs. You know, it's a new generation of jobs here in California. So I am still wildly, you know, optimistic that we're going to come out of this stronger and better. But we have to be smarter in the way we do this, no doubt about it. We do need some reforms in the state of California. I agree 110%. To sort of give you an analogy, and I don't know if Cameron felt this way, but when I first got elected in 2006 in the Assembly, and I spent 4 years in Assembly, I left early, when you get to Sacramento, you realize right away that you feel like a straitjacket has been put on you, you've been blindfolded, you've been given a couple shots of tequila, and you've been turned around 10 times, then you're given a dart and you're saying, and they're telling you to hit the bullseye target. And it's almost impossible to do. It's impossible to do because there's a whole variety of things that need to be reformed and changed. One thing that Colby mentioned was term limits. You have to modify them, or you have to remove them altogether. And so it doesn't feel like, you know, we have a special interest. You can do it without us. Don't include us. But you have to remove term limits. That's equivalent of getting a professor in classroom and saying he can be a professor for 6 years on a specialized issue. But after 6 years, you gotta get out. Can't teach. Or you get a doctor. He says, I'm your primary care doctor. But after 6 years, you can no longer be doctor. You have to get out. It's ridiculous. It's mindless. So they have to modify term limits. Two, you know, you mentioned something that was very key, which is the initiative process, which you have circumvented the legislature and gone to the people to vote. And we have to reform that, because whether you're a wealthy billionaire or even if you're on the left in the labor union, you can't put all these ballot initiatives. Because there's a lot of people here who probably voted, including myself here, voted for ballot initiatives that were good policy, good stuff. Class size reduction, for example, that's good policy. But when it's class size reduction, that means construction, that means you have to create more classrooms. So that's $10 billion, you structure that, when you go to Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, or whoever you go with, that's $20 billion, compounding with interest. So all these initiatives affect the general fund. Folks wanted 3 strikes. 3 strikes created more prisons. More prisons meant more money to build more prisons. But people wanted it. People wanted Prop 187. You remember, some of you folks may not remember Prop 187. That's when I cut my teeth politically. Prop 187 was, if you're a teacher, and if you identify a kid in your classroom who you think is undocumented, it was your legal responsibility, not subjective responsibility. It was your legal responsibility to call the INS. Then it was called the INS. Or if you were a doctor. That passed by the people. Prop 227. Whether you agree or disagree with bilingual education, that's always up for debate, no doubt. But Prop 227 said no bilingual education. In other words, you, us would vote on pedagogy inside the classroom, which is remarkable. You would actually vote on what the teacher can or cannot teach, even though you don't know anything about pedagogy. That's remarkable. So that's an initiative process that's run away. It's democracy on steroids 10 times over. That has to be reformed, no doubt about it. Lastly, we will disagree. We have to have the ability to raise revenue in the legislature, and not have 2/3. The reason why we have a ballot initiative in February, or I should say in November, is because we couldn't muster the 2/3 in the state legislature. We have a philosophical difference, I understand that. But you have to give us the tools so we can raise revenue. We raise revenue, someone may say, you know what, Kevin, I disagree with what you did. I don't like what you did. You raised taxes, and you know what, I'm going to vote against you. Or I'm going to run against you. The current system doesn't hold us accountable. Doesn't hold Democrats, doesn't hold Republicans accountable. So we can point fingers at each other. They didn't want to support, we didn't want to support, therefore the state collapses. We've got to change that ability. And you can hold us accountable. Whoever is the ruling party, the majority party, you can hold them accountable. but they have to have the tools to be able to make the changes that are necessary. And lastly, I would say is that there's an important revenue package in November, Governor Jerry Brown's package. I would implore you all to vote for that measure. If that measure does not pass, there will be cuts like we've never ever seen before, even last year's or the year after before that. And I would implore you, look at the materials, read the materials, scrutinize it, educate yourself. You'll make your own decision. Some of you may say, no, it's not for me. And I understand that, and I'm respectful of that. But I would implore you to at least educate yourself on the revenue package and vote. Voting is critical. I'm still very, very optimistic we can make this a better place. We're almost rock bottom. We're only going to be able to go up. And when we go up, we have to build this foundation the right way, the most intelligent way. It was an honor for me to be here with each and every one of you. And I thank you for the opportunity. Because I've never been to Cal State Northridge. This is my first time here. And this is a beautiful campus. So thank you very much. Thank you.
That's the thing about going last. Everybody's pretty much said, all my talking points. But,
you agree with me?
I'm trying to close not to reopen the debate. But I will agree with Mr. De Leon that I do disagree with Mr. De Leon on those points. I'll be happy to stay around afterwards and fill you in. But I spent the last 5 years representing much of the valley in Sacramento, and certainly I didn't go up there planning to be a budget expert. The things that I had intended to tackle all came to a stop basically in October of 2008 when the economy collapsed, and that has been the focus from that point on, and that's okay. You don't. I'm a big believer that you get your cards and you do the best you can with them. But I also believe that we do have to be together in Sacramento more. I am hopeful that some of the new election changes will bring that together. Because I represented one of the 5 quote-unquote swing districts in the capital. That meant within 5 points of registration, which gave me a really good perspective because pretty much however I voted, I was going to be hammered and I was going to be praised regardless. And it would be, I think I benefited from that, and it made me a better legislator. And it's my hope that others will have that, and it will make them better legislators to work through. But I will tell you that even in the darkest times, I believe that it's a noble profession. I got into it because I wanted to make a difference. I know it sounds cliche, but both my parents were teachers. My brother is in the military. This is the path that I chose, both in city council and in the legislature. And every day when I drive to the Capitol, and I look down the Capitol Mall area, and I think that's where I get to go to work every day. That's my office. I sit at a desk in the assembly floor that was made in the 1870s. Mr. De Leon and I were one of 3,500 people in the history of California to serve in the state assembly. And it's something that we don't take for granted. And I remember the first day we had training, after we'd been elected, we hadn't been sworn in yet, they brought us all on the assembly floor. And for the first time, they kind of turned on the power, if you will. And it was the first time we all saw our names on the board as members of the legislature. And I can tell you that of I think there are about 20-some of us, there wasn't a dry eye amongst us, because of we all have our paths, to getting there. And I know the first thing I did was call my dad, and just say, you can't believe what I'm looking at. And I know that I wasn't the only one who did that. And so, while we disagree, I can can assure you that every member of the legislature sincerely believes in doing what they think is right for the state, and we want to capitalize on that, and I'll start pulling on, it may not be the exact same road, but even if it's bowing out a little bit, we're all kind of pulling in the same direction, because that's the only way we're going to do it. Hopefully we get through this election, with our country intact, with our state intact, and with our communities, because, as Mr. Andrews said, people that come to this country, they still do, and they risk everything to be here, because I genuinely believe it's the greatest place, and kind of a homer for California as well, in the Valley, and even as bad as it is, we're still real fortunate, and I appreciate that you all took the time to be here, pushed us with questions, challenged us. Like I said, it's not a termed out member, no one really wants to talk to me that much anymore, so it's nice to get that, to be kept honest, and keep my skills sharp. So thank you very much, and thank you, CSUN, for hosting this today.
Let's give a little bit of applause for our entire panel here. Special thanks to Billy Ryan and Chair for putting on this event. Remember, we have a payroll series, our mayoral debate that's going to be next week. More information in the back. Please stay afterwards. We have some food, and I'm sure that maybe some of the members would love to meet some of you all. So thank you very much, and good night.